Article 2, Section 3. He shall from time to time give to the Congress information of the state of the Union, and recommend to their consideration such measures as he shall judge necessary and expedient. He may, on extraordinary occasions, convene both houses, or either of them, and in case of disagreement between them with respect to the time of adjournment, he may adjourn them to such time as he shall think proper. He shall receive ambassadors and other public ministers. He shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed, and shall commission all the officers of the United States.
All right, let's break that down.
So we start with the State of the Union. That's a phrase that may be familiar.
Yeah.
Traditionally, he doesn't actually have to deliver a speech about it. And it's not always been the case that that's how the State of the Union was delivered. It is now, mostly because it's a big television event now. But obviously that's a fairly modern development.
So that's only, if I might be wrong, but at least in modern times they only do that with the non-election year. The first one is called the inaugural address, not to say the Union, kind of.
Yeah, they don't give a State of the Union in their first year because the State of the Union is usually given in the spring, and your first year in office, what do you know in spring about the State of the Union? There's often an address to Congress given at the time the State of the Union would be, but it's not called the State of the Union address. I forget what it is called, but it's something else. I believe it was through Wilson. I'd have to look it up. But I think there was something like 100 years where the president just sent a document to Congress. Because he doesn't actually have to go talk to them. And I think it was Thomas Jefferson who was like, well, if I don't have to go talk to them, I'm not going to. Let's see here. State of the Union history. George Washington actually delivered the first one. Yeah, and it was Thomas Jefferson in 1801, who apparently thought it was too monarchical. Also, I'm pretty sure he just didn't want to. And then Woodrow Wilson was the first post-Jefferson president to do it in person in 1913. The last president to do a written one without a spoken one was Jimmy Carter in 1981. Who was just like, no, I don't think I want to talk to you.
What, his last...
Yeah, it was just days before his term ended. It used to be given in December, but since the 20th Amendment, it's generally done fairly early in the year. And presidents no longer, since Jimmy Carter, who was understandably peeved about the whole thing, they don't give final State of the Union addresses after leaving office. Or, right before leaving office, rather. But it's the time for the president to say, this is where we are right now. This is legislation I'd like to see passed. This is why. This is the effect of legislation that has recently been passed.
And that's the recommend to their consideration.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's basically because the president cannot, contrary to popular belief, the president cannot propose laws to Congress. Congress has to do that themselves. The president can say, hey, I think there ought to be a law, but it's not actually his job to set laws. It is Congress's law or job. So he can make a suggestion, and generally his suggestions are carried out by members of his party who are in Congress at the time. But that's kind of what the State of the Union is for saying, hey, I think we need to do the thing.
And so occasionally convene both houses or either of them.
Yeah. And it does establish that is on extraordinary occasions. So the president can't just at a whim say, I think we're going to get Congress together.
That was kind of like back in the day, the king had the power to call a parliament.
Yeah. And most of the time it's used in case of major world events. The famous FDR A Date Which Shall Live in Infamy speech was given to a joint session of Congress immediately following the attack on Pearl Harbor. That's an extraordinary circumstance. I believe Bush the Younger spoke before a joint session not that long after September 11th. Events of that magnitude are, generally speaking, the kind of thing that will get a president to call a joint session of Congress. By and large, that is not something that is frequently done.
Luckily.
If Congress doesn't agree on an adjournment date, the president can set one. Because somebody's got to be the final word, I think.
So he can dismiss them, kind of like the king could dismiss Parliament back in the day.
Only if Congress does not itself agree on an adjournment date. He can't just, on a whim, dismiss Congress. But if one house is insisting that they go longer than the other, then the president can be the one to set the decision. He shall receive ambassadors and other public ministers. When people come into our country, the president is our public face. That is literally one of his jobs. The president is the one who represents the American people, God help us. And you'll note it doesn't actually say, foreign leaders. Because at the time, foreign leaders did not travel out of their countries very often. The president, I forget who the first president to leave the United States while in office was. But it's one of those things that happened a lot later than people think. It may have been Wilson again. Theodore Roosevelt.
Yeah, that's how I was thinking. Roosevelt.
Yeah, traveled to Panama. Taft and Harding also visited Panama, though each was president-elect at the time. Taft went to Mexico, inasmuch as he went to Ciudad Juarez in Chihuahua, just across the border. And Harding went to Vancouver just before he died. He was on his way home from Vancouver when he died.
And Nixon went to China.
Nixon did go to China. Wilson went to France for the Paris Peace Conference in 1918. Went to Europe for nearly 7 months, apparently. And then he got the 1919 Nobel Peace Prize. Coolidge went to Cuba. That was the only time in his life that he traveled outside the contiguous United States, was when he went to Cuba for the 6th International Conference of American States.
Yeah, no, the stuff I know about Wilson now, that Peace Prize sounds like a little, yeah.
Yeah, the Peace Prize for Wilson. Peace prizes for politicians are iffy things indeed. Do I think Obama deserved a Nobel Peace Prize? I do not. You know who else didn't think Obama deserved the Nobel Peace Prize when he won it? Obama did not think he deserved the Nobel Peace Prize when he won it. He had no idea what he had done to warrant a Nobel Peace Prize.
Last one I remember getting the Peace Prize was that little girl, or teenager girl, whatever.
Malala?
I forget her name, but yes.
The Afghani?
Yeah.
Yeah. She's married now, and I'm old. It's fine. But, you know, I will make an argument for Wilson and Obama over Kissinger. Yeah. So, yes. But yeah, the most recent president not to make any international trips during his time in office was Herbert Hoover. So presidents travel a lot more than they used to.
Real cut real fast. She's an adult, right? Not one of those teenage marriages.
No, she's an adult. She's gosh, I don't remember how old she is, but she is she's 27. She's within a few months in age of my firstborn.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. So it's been a while since then, because
she won the 2014 Nobel Peace Prize.
10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So she was 17 then.
Yes.
Okay, so I was making sure, like wait a minute, because you know you say that area and marriages. And
no, it's a passage of time thing. It's a passage of time.
All right. And he. You hear me?
Yes.
Okay, making sure it says connection was lost, but anyways, it says he can kill laws. He can execute laws. Basically, execute the laws. That means killing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No. He can. It's his job as president to make sure that the laws of the United States are followed. Ideally, he would therefore not be breaking the laws of the United States himself, but clearly we do not live in an ideal world.
I'm only breaking these laws because it's power something, whatever. I can break these laws because I'm doing presidential things.
Yes. As president, I am not bound by your human laws. I felt for a long time that Chief Justice Roberts is guided by the basic principle of not wanting to be like Chief Justice Taney, the one who wrote the Dred Scott decision. In case he's curious, yeah, that's how history's going to remember him now, for making the president above the law. So, congratulations, you had your Taney moment. But yeah, you know, I don't want to absolve any U.S. president when it comes to things they did that they should not have done. A lot of U.S. presidents have, at bare minimum, skirted the boundaries of the law, and that is not purely by party line. And I do think part of that is that it's hard to be a president without making some unfortunate decisions, both on a purely human level, in that humans make mistakes, and in as much as being president is hard. However, I do think you should be making the effort. And I don't think all presidents have. You know, Nixon thought we wouldn't have him to pick on anymore, but he's been dead for years and we're still doing it because, oh, look, obvious example is obvious.
Yeah. Yeah. He died, I think he died the same month or around the same time that Kennedy's wife died.
Jackie, yeah. Boy, and their families have been friends before, you know, the election, wherein Kennedy won.
Yeah, I heard, I don't know if it's true or not. I heard, at least there was a saying that people on the radio thought Nixon won, people on the TV thought Kennedy won.
It's not as true as people try to convince you. It is true that Kennedy understood television in a way that Nixon did not. However, it is also true that who you thought won had a lot more to do with what you already believed. Okay. So Nixon died April 94. And yeah, she died in May 94.
Like month apart.
Yeah, almost exactly. He died on the 22nd and she died on the 19th. So I mean, the fact is that the Constitution specifically says the president needs to make people follow the law, and making people violate the law is pretty much the opposite of that. And yes, commission all the officers of the United States. Technically, everyone who works for the United States government works in the president's name, which is part of why you have pictures of the president on the walls of, say, your local Social Security office.
Oh. When they say officers, I thought that, does that mean like the military officers, like lieutenant?
You know, I think it's one of the vague phrasings of the Constitution, honestly. It might be intended to be military officers, though, again, there was very little standing army at the time. But it might be anyone who holds a job of authority. You know, and I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know how it's traditionally taken. But based on a plain reading of the text, it could go either way.